Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinoski, your host, and I'm joined today by Matt Horine. He is Head of Reindustrialization at Veryable. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
Thanks for being on, Matt. We go way back, so it's good to finally have you join us here and have a chat.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to talk more about Veryable. Mike was on here quite a while ago, so some people might be aware of what you guys have going on, but I definitely want to drill into that anew. Before we do that, hop on here and just tell us about yourself, how you're doing what you're doing today.
Absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me on, Jim. And I know you've been a friend of Veryable for a very long time, and excited to talk with you about it in depth today. I am the head of reindustrialization at Veryable. So I've come back to Veryable with this focus and this change in the economic climate that we're seeing take shape in the country. And oftentimes, people hear the word reindustrialization and what does that mean? So we'll get into that, I'm sure, throughout our talk. But the core belief that we have at Veryable is the critical path and one of the biggest constraints for reindustrializing the country and for manufacturing in general is labor access and access for workers, which we call operators on our platform, and companies who are looking to build some type of flexible capacity in a modern environment, in a modern manufacturing environment. So old models, all kinds of challenges with staffing to averages or trying to build out a full-time structure for warehouse workers. The game has changed pretty significantly, especially over the past couple of years. So businesses come on to our platform. They can post what we call an op or a work opportunity. They design that based on the real-time demand that they have in their facility, the real-time needs of their workforce, and what they want to do and achieve operationally. And we know, through multiple case studies and multiple business partners, that what that means is, how do we get our on-time delivery up? How do we get more throughput? How do we have a merit-based structure where operators and workers get real-time feedback about their performance, where they can upskill and learn about different things, and where they choose to go to work on a daily basis? That's a big part of the gig economy. But more importantly, I think what a big part of people are looking for in general is the option and the opt-in factor of what they're doing on a daily basis. And for businesses, what that means is more agility, more flexibility, something we talk about commonly in the supply chain in this day and age. The challenges with you could look over the past decade, how reliant we are on our supply chain, whether it was pandemic era, which there's all kinds of thoughts on that, and now in a tariff era, where there are real challenges to that because people have deleveraged themselves to the point where they are looking for new suppliers, and they can't have that matched with a really bad work strategy and labor strategy. So we love talking to companies about how they can build more capacity, how they can get more agile, and how they can get more opt-ins from what we don't believe where there's a worker shortage. We think that there's a shortage of access and a shortage of new paths into manufacturing. So that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and so you mentioned you were with Veryable and then you went afield and came back. What was it that brought you back from what you were doing when you decided to go back for a while?
No, great question. I took a few years away after building Veryable from the very early days when we were just in a couple of markets. We're now in almost 30 plus markets across the United States. I had some other opportunities that I turned my attention to and got back what I would call into industry, into manufacturing myself. Worked at a small company that built air quality products for an amount of time and enjoyed the manufacturing process and the commercial process. But the moment is really big right now. And I think if you look at the national stage, manufacturing, we use the words like renaissance or reindustrialization or some type of industrial change that's happening in the country. It's really an inflection point. And I don't think that's just because of where we make things. I think it has a lot to do with a lot of things that have undercut the American manufacturing sector being addressed all at once. And there's a couple of buckets that falls into, regulatory reform, trade agreements that will probably balance out not only trade deficits, but how and where and why we strategically produce things for ourselves, immigration reform, and probably some types of tax policy that will impact the broader population, not just manufacturing. So we look at those things and say, now's a real opportunity. And we think that the climate is changing. We know that people have been through what we call a war for several years, underreported, jobs numbers, problems with, growth in federal government instead of the manufacturing sector. And we're seeing all those things to begin to be addressed at once. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of said it, same thing I've been saying here lately is manufacturing is having a moment, and, shame on us if we don't capitalize on it.
Absolutely.
One thing that I always talk about is, we can talk about reindustrializing, and there's certainly segments that were largely deindustrialized. I mean, we make 3% of what we wear today.
Right.
Our shipbuilding has cratered to where, in global terms, we represent 0.1% of shipbuilding. And so I'm all for that reindustrialization. But what I also want to convey to people is it's not like we deindustrialized as a country. I mean, we're still number 2. And I always say, it's an own goal that we're not still number 1 ahead of China.
Right.
And that's what we need to fix. But you hit on that key thing about the people, and more particularly the skills that we've got to pull back in to deliver on that. So talk a little bit about what Veryable does to enable people to get the skills and the workforce they need.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, going back to talking about the model and the profile of the person that may be using the app to find work, we see all kinds of those profiles. We see people who use Veryable exclusively to earn their income, which is a fantastic thing. We see people who are supplementing their income because they are a specific profile of worker. They're not a service-based worker. They're not somebody who is necessarily customer-facing. There's a lot out there in the market right now where you can go from being a pizza delivery person to working in a manufacturing plant. That's not the same profile, or somebody who is really genuinely interested. So what we see in terms of upskilling is a practical exercise and a practical application on a daily basis of someone who is exposing themselves to new companies by placing a bid and opting in. We don't assign people. Veryable is the matchmaker. We're a platform. We're somebody who brings business opportunities to the platform and workers to the platform who want to have access to them.
Yeah.
And so what that means is these companies build what we call a labor pool over time, where they have vetted the worker, the operator, through their actual work. They give them a rating. They're paid on a daily basis. So there's that fast earning potential, but also one that allows them to build this broad portfolio of work. And in their operator profile, if you and I were a business today and we had posted an op, we would see bids come in. And what we would be able to do is drill down into that profile and say, what types of work have they been doing? What companies have they worked at? Is there somebody adjacent in my industry, or somebody that they're pretty close, 50% of what they do, forklift, cherry picking ops, those types of things, all apply in this environment. And what happens is the operator builds that relationship with the business that they're working at. They like them. They like coming to work for them. And through that merit, they are given what I would consider increased degrees of responsibility over time. And so we've seen a great example was here in the Houston market. One operator was a great machinist, and they kind of worked their way into this business and became a critical component of completing orders on time. And he didn't want to work full time there because he had a YouTube channel, which is something that's pretty foreign to a lot of us. I know we're talking on a podcast today, but on the shop floor, if a worker told me, hey, I've got my YouTube channel on Thursdays and Fridays, I don't know what you're talking about. We've got to get these orders out the door. But what they did was they tailored that experience for him because he was so good, and he learned their machines quickly and got access to this type of work skill that was real time, real productivity, and not this kind of academic approach of we don't have enough welders, we don't have enough this or that. It's real productivity that people earn based on their merit and based on their work in the app. And it's turned out great for a lot of our operators.
Yeah, and to me, that's a huge thing that sets you guys apart is when you partner with companies, they're able to build that database of known, I guess they're employees, sometimes part-time, sometimes full-time, but known entities that they can pull in as they need them and as the people want to work, kind of matching those ends of demand and supply. And then, knowing what you have coming in so your planning is accurate and you are confident that you're going to be able to deliver the goods versus, for example, a temp model where you might get people who are just occupying space, to be brutally honest, right?
Right. I think that's the experience of a lot of manufacturers is that they look at something like a worker shortage. And I think that the proper framework is worker access. So how do we make this more agile so that they can open the door wider for people to come in and address real-time demand, which ops guys and ops professionals love the idea of killing two birds with one stone on that front, yeah. Right? And it's not a means in and of itself of saying, you'll see this all the time when there's a new manufacturing plant announced or from like the economic development types, they say it's 300 American jobs or it's 350 jobs. Well, that is at capacity or that is at some type of steady state, as opposed to our operators who are primarily independent contractors, which we view as like the real independent or first state of man, as Mike likes to say, as somebody who is working with their hands, opting in and choosing what they want to do, and a business that's getting the real-time demand addressed. That difference is something that is transformative for a lot of places where I've seen distribution centers that have to have hiring fairs every month where they have a target of hiring 100 people. And then there's a 50% attrition rate within the first couple of days and further attrition because real life happens, people's circumstances change, and they're right back on the wheel, the next month, same hiring number, just trying to staff to that average. They don't have to do that anymore.
Right. Yeah. And especially for an operation that sees those ups and downs, being able to have that flex labor is huge, especially when you're going to get the skills and the talent that it takes to meet those higher demand periods.
Right. Absolutely. And it's, the other side of that too is the performance driven environment. So operators are very proud of what they do, like all manufacturers and anybody who makes anything with their hands. The product of their work quality is core to them. And when you have, there have been cases where operators maybe have not been in the right environment, or it wasn't, they didn't like it, or the person that brought them in says it's not for you, which is totally okay. I mean, there's things that I'm not good at where I would be horrible, showing up to work. But that kind of fast paced, hey, this was great. You tried it. We're going to give you a good rating, but maybe something else is better for you. Immediate access back out to the marketplace where they can bid on other opportunities, and that business can cycle faster and say, we can find the exact type of person that we want, not as a full-time employee, but somebody who comes in and helps us solve problems right away. And then we do it again next week.
Yep. Now, one thing I should have mentioned early on is I wrote about Veryable for Forbes, I don't know, 5 years ago. Yeah. And then, like I said, had Mike, your CEO, on the show here a few years ago. And going back to that article, at that time, it was when you were in your first go around, you said, you're in a couple of markets. So still very fresh from a concept perspective, didn't really know how it was going to fly. But I personally thought at that time you had a unique and useful offering. And it's been phenomenal to watch. Now you expand what you said, you're in 30 markets across the U.S. now. Yeah. So, your growth has been stupendous. How has that met with what you expected back then? And where do you see yourselves going?
No, it's a great question because it's something that we always believed would happen because the model is so attractive for a manufacturing operation. What makes Veryable different and so unique is that we realize the balance of supply and demand, which we refer to, our supply side being the workers and the businesses. This is not, a West Coast offshore tech company approach to just put it out there and make it happen. You can certainly sign up and post and get work started right away. But to achieve real operational results and flexibility, our team works with local markets and works with those businesses to say, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to increase your on-time delivery rate? Are you trying to lower your labor spend, your fixed costs by getting something that's a little more flexible? And working with those businesses to really achieve operational excellence where they can get the results that they're looking for and people are getting a real benefit from it as a worker and somebody who's earning their income. And so back then, yes, it was very early days. I can certainly go on for a long period of time about the early days because building that from the ground up was so exciting. But seeing it take place in multiple markets in different regions across the country really is a testament to the Veryable team. And I've been away for some time, but I'm back because it works in, we're headquartered in Texas. The manufacturing environment in the Southeast is a little bit different than the Midwest, but not that different. It's one of those things that everybody says we're different, but we're all trying to achieve something that's very similar within operations. And so it's really taken root.
Yep. You talked about you don't believe there's a worker shortage, but one thing we do have to face is really you got a double whammy with the baby boomers, excuse me, where obviously we call them the baby boom for a reason, the biggest generation in recent memory, and they're all retiring now, but they're also the same generation that was the last one where America said, geez, manufacturing is a great career, skilled trades are a phenomenal direction. And since then, we've been minimizing those as career opportunities for our youth. And so there's certainly a skills challenge we're facing now. How do you guys see your program with respect to needing to kind of, funnel those skilled workers to where they need to be and be the most effective?
No, that's a really great question because it does address not only the gap, but the attitude towards manufacturing. And so I'll start at the really high level. Over the past couple of decades, you can call it globalization, you can call it the transition to a service-based economy, college degree tracks, all the college-based degree tracks for everyone. That type of mentality served a purpose where we saw this rapid modernization and digitization of the economy of our lives. I was thinking back the other day, there's as much time between 1988 and 2008 as there is from 2008 to now. And I remember when the iPhone came out and how much that changed everything. And so, those types of things led the economy in what we would consider a less industrialized environment. But there were underlying forces that really pulled that out of the country, where we were looking for labor cost outs. We were looking to have things faster, cheaper, quite frankly, from importing perspectives, and trying to change our economy into one where it's a service-based, college degree only type structure. It doesn't work in theory and it doesn't work in practice, because what it means is we have offshored a certain amount of our industrial base that covers everything from defense to healthcare to everything else. And there's been this awakening and realization that to control your destiny, you have to have manufacturing as the core. The industrial base is truly it to have true independence. And so what we're seeing now is, and I can start at a level where we had a guest on our show on U.S. manufacturing today a couple of weeks ago. Somebody was working in that type of structure and was working with manufacturing and businesses, and he saw all those things that you mentioned: an aging ownership structure, small businesses being the backbone of the economy. Somewhere around 95+% of manufacturing is what we consider small, medium-sized business. And he said, I can do that. I can buy a plastics business and I can do that. I can jump in and I can gear it towards a younger workforce where people are retiring. It's the circle of life. Naturally, it occurs and cycles out.
Yep.
But in the past maybe 20 years or so, that hasn't been the desired end state for anybody maybe coming out of school or some type of management training or somebody going directly into the workforce. It's looking for something else. But now this realization that manufacturing really is the core of what makes us a strong country, and people wanting to get involved because at a base level, it's very patriotic. It's something that people who go into it are building things, they are creating things, and it's the natural state of any modern society or any society really, where we get people who want the fast-paced digitization of being able to bid and work and choose where they're going on a daily basis, but businesses that say, hey, we live in this modern world where we actually have to tailor our labor structure to the demand cycle. And so that fast-paced paradigm really could bring more people into manufacturing. We have hundreds of thousands of people who've signed up for our app. We have thousands of businesses who use it. And it's all based on, we know the demand is there, it's pent up. Who's going to take this on? And that kind of challenge, I think, is a calling for a lot of people. And skilled trades and all those things, I think you're seeing a much heavier emphasis on it, not only in the news cycle, but in what people want to do. They don't want to go to college and take out 6+ figures of debt to have a degree that may or may not land them a job, because what part of that shortening cycle, I read something the other day that Gen Z is extremely concerned, more than I am or more than boomers are, about what AI could do. These types of things cycle through very quickly, but manufacturing stays the same. It might change in its technology, it might change in some automation process, but at the core, you have to have people who are building and making things. So I think that realization is setting in, and we're starting to see the effects of it.
Yeah. Now, and you just made my next point, which is there is a whole new swath of automation that's occurring, in part because of the people challenge, but also because technology is leading us there. Mm-hmm. How does Veryable kind of foster the development of skills that are only just now kind of coming into that need with our manufacturers?
That's a really good question. And so I would start with, automation does not necessarily take away manufacturing jobs. People have that one-to-one association that aren't familiar with manufacturing environments. And a great example of that is, I took a tour of the Peterbilt factory a few years ago. And 20+ years ago, they brought in some automation, and that's obviously scaled up since then. At the time, the concern was, we have a great workforce of people who have been here for 20 years, 30 years, plus they were worried about, we're going to lose jobs. What it meant was, somebody has to put the inputs into those machines. Somebody has to learn about the lean methodologies that it takes to produce a truck or a certain amount of trucks a day coming off the line. A machine is great for lifting and doing a lot of the things that were very physical, but the worker becomes more upskilled and more sophisticated on that machine as they continue to produce. And so Peterbilt was one of those companies that I said, they've really got it figured out. They knew that this wasn't something, it was going to actually complement the worker and make them more productive, in the sense that they could work with the automation and the machinery to achieve their goals. Yep. And that is something that I hear all the time. You go through waves of this and cycles of this. A few years ago, it was robots, and then it's cobots, and then it's this type of bot, and then it's an AI bot. Like, we're watching it in real time as things unfold and what's going to take jobs. All these things are designed to complement operational excellence, manufacturing environments, and the worker.
Yeah. And the history of U.S. manufacturing employment bears you out. The biggest losses were between like the 70s and the 90s, and there was certainly automation driving that, but that's also when you really saw those whole swaths of industry being hollowed out.
Yes.
And from then until about 5-10 years ago, we were actually growing our manufacturing employment numbers. And then between the Great Recession in 2008 and COVID, I think those two things kind of took wind out of our sails. But right. I think we're going to be back into a boom here, just like what we were talking about with this moment we're having, and people realizing that having your entire supply chain stretch halfway around the world and be at the beck and call of things going perfectly right. probably isn't the greatest strategy.
No, absolutely not. And it's always an interesting dynamic, because it's okay to talk about this discourse on X or LinkedIn about automation or AI hollowing out, manufacturing base. It has not. That is not what has caused, over the past 10 to 20 years, the shift out or into manufacturing. What you have to look at the long arc of is the last 30 to 40 years of policy. And that's what has probably had the biggest impact on it. And to your point, exposed a lot of risk where we think that society's grown too complex or too modern to have things be the old way. One thing that's always discouraging to me is there was an anecdote about a factory in the Midwest that made toasters, and people saying, we don't want to make toasters anymore. Why not? Why don't we want to make toasters? If you find a great economical way with a flexible labor model and you can source from the United States and you bring down that cost, of course you can do that. You can just do things. You can make things. And so that's always been, at the back of my mind when people say, oh, we're not bringing manufacturing back like it was. Well, of course we're not. We do things differently now, but also there's a lot more to be made here than is currently made here.
Well, and there's a certain arrogance to that attitude. I had it out of a commenter in my Substack back a month or two ago, where he made the comment, I've been in textile plants and those jobs aren't really great to work at. And, here's a city guy who's never been in manufacturing himself, basically saying, I find what you're doing distasteful, so you can't have that job here in America.
Right.
And that's really what our regulatory environment has done, is it's been largely urban people driving these policies that affect rural people and the jobs that they held dear. And just that attitude that, because I don't like it, I'm going to wall it off to anyone in America. That's insane.
No, it's absolutely insane. And it's one of those things that only somebody who's not informed at a distance, sure, we don't want to have I'll tell you why this cuts right to the core of it. You're right. I don't want to have a sweatshop here, which is exactly why a lot of things were offshored, because we took advantage of cheap cost outs and cheaper labor to remove cost out of the structure. And so if your mindset is that's how textiles are made, of course, that's why they're made that way. They're made there for that reason, because people are taking advantage of a less regulated environment. And
and the other insanity to that end of it, where you're just moving it somewhere else, is you're not shutting down the sweatshops. You're just making sure they're not on our shores. Same thing with mining, same thing with pollution. We've just offshored the things that the urban people found distasteful. They're still happening at ever greater rates and quantities. We just don't see them up close and personal. And so out of sight, out of mind, but it's not changing the world, where what we've been talking about, automation, moving people into those higher level jobs, instead of doing the grunt labor, the manual work, they're programming machines and monitoring automated equipment. That's changing the world.
Yes, absolutely. It's the upskilling of the worker, because here's the alternative version. And what has actually happened is you've seen it in thousands of small towns or mid-sized communities across the country, where a manufacturing plant is the economic roots of the community, because the secondary thing that happens out of that is people go grocery shopping. They buy things, they do things. And I'm not a consumerist by any stretch of the imagination, but those are the second and third order effects of manufacturing plants. And I've driven across the country. I've seen it in small towns everywhere where it was once a thriving community. And there's great talks about this you'll see it on X, where people will drive through town and be like, wow, this was a really great small American downtown. What happened? Well, the manufacturing core was ripped out and people had no secondary and third effects. And the consequences of that are dramatic and extremely disturbing if we continue the trend, because what that means to me is that we're not investing here. We're looking for the cheapest cost of goods so that we can buy more things. And someone said it the other day, if I could give up 1% of GDP to say that we had a happy workforce and a happy country, I'd trade it in a heartbeat. And that's the truth. And I call, that GDP enjoyers. It's somebody we're focused on a number and not the economic heartbeat of the country. What's odd about that is if you focus on it the right way, your GDP is going to go up, because you're producing more and real tangible things, and not growth in government or growth in services. We export services. We do a great job at that. We can do manufacturing again as well.
Yep. And you guys are providing a means to make that happen. So let's talk about your future plans. Do you have a specific set of other markets that you intend to move into in the near future?
Certainly. I think that, one of the things that we see taking shape and why this time is so exciting for manufacturing as general is because there are going to be regulatory reforms. The Department of Labor just last week rolled back a Biden era reversal. It's a reversal of a reversal ruling on independent contractors, where we say we have to get right again. What's the freest state of the market? Where can people make the choices, but where we can have, a really solid core? That model is changing, and the regulatory environment is changing. There's also, deregulation around a lot of what gets built in the country. If you put up walls around building these types of plants or investing in the country, people aren't going to invest. It's seen as too risky. So as that happens, that tidal wave, we see more markets, we see more offerings and solutions for operations professionals. There's a lot of that stack built into our platform where people can see and measure the real-time value that they're getting. So it's onward and upward from here.
Excellent. Any last thoughts you want to share for the folks out there that ought to know about Veryable?
No, if you're interested in finding out more about it, if you're a manufacturer, you can visit our website and create a business profile for your business and see what type of labor pool you have in your area. We're very excited about the state of things. We think that, there's a couple of personas that we've seen out there, and I think it's one thing to highlight. I call it the survivor and the fighter and the coaster. If you're one of those things, if you're coasting and just kind of riding along to get along, now's a great time to really invest in your business and expand, because we think there's pent-up demand. The survivor, you made it. Congratulations. We think that you have weathered a serious storm that started in 2020 with the pandemic, and no one quite knows what happened there other than being overexposed to a global supply chain. And the expansionist is, if you're waiting on the sidelines, get out there now. We're so optimistic about the changes that we're seeing in manufacturing, the attitudes that we're seeing towards it, and the success of people who truly want to build things and create lasting value. We think that the tides have turned significantly.
I couldn't agree more. And, for me, looking at you guys, getting that chance to cover you fairly early on and then watch your growth and the success of your model has been phenomenal. And I just wish you all the best, and I'll be rooting for you and watching as things move forward. We'll have you guys back on sometime soon to give us an update.
That sounds great, Jim. Thanks for having us, and we appreciate you always championing us when you get the chance.
Sure thing, Matt. Thanks for being here. And of course, as always, thanks to you in the audience. You are why we're here. And, this has been phenomenal. I think this is so integral to manufacturing, and yet it's a piece a lot of people don't think about. That's what we try to bring here, is these kinds of stories that are maybe not immediate, but definitely impactful to manufacturing. We're here every Tuesday, so I can't promise everything's going to be as impactful as what Matt brought us, but it's all going to be at least a little impactful. So we'll see you next week. Until then, Jim Vinoski from Manufacturing Talks, signing off. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.